Hello, hello. Welcome back to another video. Round 4 of the Amsterdam Chess Open. I face Ario Andringa. Andringa? I forgot how to pronounce Dutch names. I don't know anymore. I'm so used to English, especially when I speak English. My Dutch pronunciation is thrown out of the window. And the other way around as well, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, my opponent is actually a very interesting opponent. So I had very little time to check my opponent's games. I saw in the database that he only has a few games and none of the games cover the opening that I want to play against him. So I just basically went in the game with no prep. But what I did see in my opponent's games was his rating change. So there was one game of like 9 years ago where he got checkmated in 12 moves. Like it was not a, it was, like it was not a very good game. But then in 2022, his rating was 1400. We're now in 2024. My opponent has a rating of 1900. He gained 500 points and he's not a kid. Let's put that out there. He's not he's not old, but he's also not very young. Usually we see with kids that they gain 500 points very easily, but this person has grinded chess so much and has improved so much in the past 2 years. I was really seeing the difference, especially compared to the game 9 years ago, where he made quite some bad mistakes, but now he's actually playing proper chess, and it's amazing to see. But this also comes with a drawback that I have to play him and try to survive this game, because this is a tough pairing. It's a very tough pairing because basically my opponent has won almost every single game he has played in the past 2 years. Like, how else would you gain 500 points, right? So I knew that this game was going to be very difficult for me, and I was trying to not underestimate him. So yeah, I just hope that my experience would somehow help me in this situation, because clearly, he has grinded a lot the past 2 years, but I have played for many years, so I hope that my experience comes in handy here. But yeah, I can tell you already, it was a very tough game. Let's see what happened. E4, E6, so happy to play the French. D4, D5, knight E2. So my opponent plays a Tarrasch, and here I was thinking, I played like almost everything against the Tarrasch, but I don't really know what to play against someone lower rated than me, and I'm not really prepared, and I don't want to have like a boring position that gets drawish easily. I want to have a fight. So I play bishop e7. And here my opponent for c3, and I just hate this move with a passion. This is the second time this year that someone played this against me, or maybe more times, but I remember this is the second time at least. And the last time I actually played it better, even though I had no idea what I was doing. And this time I still didn't know what I was doing. I couldn't remember. I remembered something about misplaying it slightly the last time. So I was trying to avoid that. But instead of doing that, I played knight f6. And that turns out to be a bad move, because now I'm running into some issues where after e5, my knight moves, and their moves are just queen g4, attacking my pawn g7, and creating some damage on the king side here, which I can definitely not afford. There are lines where this is okay, but not this one. Yeah, there are some like minor differences that make a big difference in the end. But anyway, I am supposed to play c5 here, so I'm just making a mental note for myself that next time I have to play c5, and for the next time I also will make sure to have a file ready for this, that I have properly looked into this, because this move, c3, is such an annoying move. It's such a subtle move, and it's really hard to see how you react to this. Like, what do you do against it? But anyway, c5 is the way. I played the move knight f6, e5, knight fd7, bishop d3, and c5. Now I played it, but now it's a bit too late. And after the move knight e2, so it's not as bad anymore, because queen g4 was really, really tough to deal with. Here I went for knight c6, and I was very confused during the game that this position doesn't feel right. It doesn't really feel the same as what I'm used to. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that the knights are placed in such a way, like they're much better placed than in other lines, because here the knights are flexible. In other lines they are limited quite a bit, and yeah, I just cannot really figure out what my plan is here. Knight f3, queen b6. Apparently taking on d4 is better, but it's just so hard to decide to do this, and you have to then play f6, and yeah, that's the best you can do here, and I can already sense that my position is not great because my pawn on e6 is weak, and everything just feels quite awkward here. So I went for queen b6, just trying to attack that pawn on d4, even though it's so well defended. My opponent went for a3, and here I took, after all. C takes d4, and here f6. So I basically went for this idea, but then with my queen on b6, which is maybe not the best way to go, but I thought, what else can I do? E takes f6, knight takes f6, short castle, bishop d7. I'm just trying to develop and see what I can do here. b4, short castle, knight g3. Here my opponent had the opportunity to play b5, because after b5, knight a5, there's knight e5, and whew, that knight is very annoying. If only I could maneuver my bishop to, let's say, g6, and I really want to put it on h5 maybe, but then the problem is that my opponent will just play knight g3 and not allow me to do this at all. So yeah, my pieces are very limited here, and it's quite a tough position. So my opponent for knight g3 instead. So I was pretty happy about this. It gave me some time. So I played bishop d6, and after bishop b2, I thought, okay, now I can maneuver my knight to e7, and maybe I will go to f5. I was especially ready to get rid of, lose the pair of bishops by bishop takes g3, by playing that, and then maybe knight f5, and try to control the light scores with my knight somehow. That was the ideal scenario. But of course, my opponent is not going to allow that to happen so easily. My opponent went for knight e5, bishop b5, and now rook e1. Bishop takes d3. I thought I have to trade those bishops because my bishop is pretty bad in this position. Knight takes d3, bishop takes g3, h takes g3, knight e4. And here I was skeptical about my position because there's always knight c5 around the corner, and my pawn on e6 is weak, my knight on e4 is very loose there. If only I had the time to play knight f5, knight e6, that would be brilliant, because c4 is also an interesting square for the knight to be on. But of course, it's very difficult. But fortunately for me, my opponent did not play the right move. I thought my opponent would have played rook e2 to make sure that the pawn on f2 is defended, to then play knight c5 on the next move and cause me a lot of trouble here. Instead, he went for the move queen g4, and I thought, okay, this gives me some time, because the queen is not actually doing anything on g4, and I have some time to improve my position. So I went for knight f5, and here my opponent made the move f3, and I was very confused during the game. Obviously, I considered it, but I thought I'd just take a pawn with me, and I'm happy. This is, the best that could happen to me in this position, because any other normal move is just very challenging to deal with for me. So f3, I guess after knight takes g3, my opponent is trying to pressure the pawn on e6. So it makes sense to go for this, and it's definitely still very complicated, but it felt like it gave me chances to see counterplay, because the knights here are really annoying, and in a few moves you will see what's going on, because what is about to happen, or what could have happened, is crazy. Knight c5. Knight comes in, attacks the pawn on e6, and here I went for the move rook f8 to defend. I didn't really know what to do. The move queen b5 is very strong here. I considered it, and I was like, it feels so natural, because you don't want to allow knight e7, right? Because that was a fork. And you kind of want to step away from that pawn, because that pawn, it feels like it's going to be captured anyway at some point. So, is there a way for me to find counterplay here? I couldn't find it. But apparently, let me show you the craziest line ever. Knight takes e6. So here rook f6 is what I am supposed to play, because if knight takes g7, I cannot take, because then my knight drops on g3 and my king is very weak. Also, there's maybe rook e7 ideas there. Very scary. Rook g6 is a move. And now knight takes f5. White is not moving that queen. Rook takes g4. Knight h6. The king moves. Knight takes g4. And this position, it's like crazy. I don't know what's going on, but apparently I'm winning here. This is completely crazy. So, yeah, I don't think I would have found that with a million years of time. So, anyway, I didn't do this for obvious reasons, and I went for rook f8, just keeping it simple. Rook e5, and now a5. Here, I was feeling confident, because I feel like my opponent's giving me time here to come back, and being able to open files on the queen side is very beneficial for me. So, obviously I want to go for this. Bishop c3, a takes b4, and here I thought, okay, I got my opponent, because my opponent cannot take that pawn back. If Bishop takes b4, this queen takes b4. And guess what? After a takes b4, rook takes e1, a1, king f2. Isn't that the most beautiful checkmate ever? I mean, look at this. The two knights are defending each other, and they're covering these squares, and the rook does the final job, checkmating the king. Like, this is crazy. It would have been so cool to checkmate like this, but obviously my opponent saw this, and it's not going to make it that easy for me. So when I saw this, I was super happy and excited, but then I realized there's bishop e1. And the party is maybe over with the knights over here, because my knight on g3 is trapped. I don't have a good move here with the knights, so now the question is what to do. I don't want to lose my pawn on b4. I want to continue pushing. I want to create threats. I considered move h5, which turns out to be the best move. I was a bit afraid of queen f4, and I didn't like that the queen could like retreat, come back, and help the position. And I thought I would be like permanently worse after that. But apparently h4, and I'm completely fine. I'm just defending the knight on g3, and everything is fine. But instead, I went for b takes a3, and here I was playing with fire, because bishop takes g3, I'm down a piece. I'm down a piece. I don't know what I was thinking, but I was so sure that I was going to promote one way or the other. So queen b2, rook e1, and here knight e3. I saw this move. This is the reason why I went for this line, and I was so excited that I found this move. You know, I felt so cool, because the point is basically that if rook takes e3, queen takes a1, and I win the exchange. I'm still down materially because 2 pieces versus a rook, but I do have this crazy passed pawn, and I thought this was completely fine. Obviously, if my opponent moves a queen, it can be checkmate on g2. So queen h3 is another move, but then I guess you just like lose after queen takes c4, and like white's position is falling apart. There's also knight c2, so a lot of losing moves, it feels like. But my opponent took on e3, queen takes a1, rook e1, queen c3. Here, things were pretty shaky. It's very difficult to find a win here, because I'm running out of pieces, and my opponent has so many pieces to still attack me. So here, knight takes e6, rook e7, and here I'm already down to 1 minute. So imagine, like, the time pressure was real in this game. So I did consider... I was debating between g6 or rook e7, but I could not get myself to play g6, because what happens after queen g5 and then queen f6 and then checkmate on g7? Like, everything is so weak. There's queen takes e5. This feels like an absolute disaster. But apparently, their computer let me know that rook a6 is the way to defend, because after queen f6, apparently I can take here, bishop takes e1, and I can take here. I take on e1 afterwards, and I'm completely winning here because my pawn is just promoting at some point. So, yeah, crazy stuff. So eventually I decided to play rook e7, and this is allowing a forced repetition. And if I don't go for the repetition, I get checkmated. Let me show you why and how. Knight takes g7. White is sacrificing the knight. If I don't take that knight, I'm done for. Well, I mean, I'm sure like I get checkmated somewhere. Like there's no way that my king is safe here. Also, obviously my rook is hanging. If I take on e1, I was thinking that white would go king h2 here or something like this, and my king is just feeling very unhappy. I could not imagine that I would be okay here. So yeah, I didn't want to think about that. But then the problem is after rook takes g7. So let's say queen e6 check, king h8. This is forced checkmate, because after queen e8, rook takes, rook g8, and bishop e5. Another beautiful checkmate, but this time towards me. And if there's one thing I don't want, it's getting checkmated here. So yeah, and that means that I cannot play king h8. So rook f7, I have to go back. And that means that my opponent can just force the repetition, and it's a draw. So I had no other choice. All the other moves are basically losing for me. But fortunately for me, my opponent did not play knight takes g7 and played queen g5. I was so relieved. Well, not as much, because queen g5 was still an annoying move, and I thought, I have to find a way to deal with this, because I was so focused on knight takes g7. and I don't have so much time on the clock. I have like 30 seconds again, so what do? I played with rook d7, not the most ideal option, but I really couldn't see anything else. It was such a rough position to play. Knight c5 is what my opponent played, rook f7, queen takes c5, and here I played a2. And here, I will tell you something really funny. Maybe a little bit embarrassing, but it's not so bad. Well, here my opponent made a huge mistake. I'll tell you what my opponent should have played, what he didn't play. My opponent should have played move knight b3 here. With the simple reasoning that you're trying to stop the promotion. Well, this move would have stopped me from promoting because I was so sure that promoting would have led me to be down on material because I sacrificed a piece and then this happened and that happened and that happened. For some reason in my brain, I could not connect the dots that after queening, I am fine. Like I will be ahead material and this is fine. I thought, I couldn't really understand that. I don't know. Obviously, when I look at it now, I see that I'm just up in the exchange. But during the game, for some reason, that did not cross my mind. I don't know. I don't know what happened. But I was under the impression that after knight b3, I probably have to play h6. I just have to give my king some loop to make sure that I don't get a back rank checkmated. I was not scared of the back rank in these positions right now because I knew that everything was covered in some way. But yeah, for some reason, I had like a minor blind spot that I could possibly not promote right now. I have to wait for it. Maybe if my opponent had played knight b3 and I suddenly realized that, oh, I can just promote, maybe I would have realized it, but I cannot say it for sure. But after my opponent's move, knight a4, I was so relieved. I was so relieved because I could not possibly believe that I was going to win this game any longer. Queen takes e1 check, bishop takes e1, and after a1 queen, I got my new queen. I got my queen back, and it's completely winning. And this is why my opponent resigned here. It's quite an anticlimactic ending. After everything had happened, this is how it ends. But I was just so relieved because my opponent gave me such a big challenge. It was really difficult for me to play here, and my opponent just played super well. So big props to him. He has so much potential, like seeing how he has risen and how well he played in this game. Obviously, I could sense that the experience was the main difference here because once he got low on the clock, he started to make these blunders like knight a4. But yeah, other than that, like he played amazingly and I really had a tough game. It was really difficult for me. So he definitely put up a great fight and I was very fortunate to have won this game. So overall, day 2 was pretty good for me. And yeah, now I am on 3 out of 4. So day 3 was something else. I'll leave the rest for the next video because the next video, you don't want to miss it because round 5, if you know the result, you know it, but round 5 was something else. So make sure to stay tuned for the next video to find out what happened in round 5. Thanks for watching and I'll just see you in the next video. Bye!